What did the Aztec wear? The Aztec Empire was the predominant empire in modern-day central Mexico. These were the people encountered by the Spanish conquistadors in the 1500s. The capital city, Tenochtitlan, had taken over control and resources of nearby cities. After the Spaniards laid siege on the capital, the empire collapsed and prominent structures such as the Templo Mayor were razed to the ground and replaced by a Catholic Baroque-style church. Tenochtitlan has a very interesting story. The story told to the Spanish was that 300 years prior, the Mexica were nomadic. They were on a long journey guided by their god, Huitzilopochtli, to find their new home. Having originated from a place in the north called Aztlan, or the land of the heron. They were happy, immortal, living among numerous birds and a giant lake. Aztlan became dangerous because of the weather and they had no choice but to leave. Eventually, the Mexica came upon Lake Texcoco, where they saw in the distance an eagle perched on a cactus holding a snake in its beak. This was the Promised Land. Building a city on top of a lake was not easy. However, it led to rich agricultural practices and they were able to sustain a population of over 150,000 people, one of the largest in Mesoamerica. The symbol of the eagle on the cactus with a snake is central to the Mexican flag. What inspires me about the Aztec Empire is that the symbols, textiles, people, and food still persist with vigor through colonialization. I am very curious in the features of Aztec clothing that existed before the colonial conquest, to understand it better and to appreciate how much of it has survived to this day. In Mexico, there are a lot of traditional and regional clothing which would take years to cover and investigate. So today, I am restricting my analysis to just one region and one time period. Not many textiles from the pre-colonial period survived, but we have pictographic evidence from the records that haven't been destroyed by the colonialists, as well as first-hand knowledge from surviving natives. Weaving. Clothing was very important to the Aztec society. All women were expected to weave and produce the textiles for their family unit as well as for religious offerings. Textiles were produced on a backstrap loom. As children, girls were given toy versions of the weaving equipment, and in death they were buried with their equipment. They used maguey for much of the weaving. Maguey is a plant used for production of the drink pulque, and the fibrous parts can be beaten, dried, and woven into fabrics that were quite comfortable, akin to wool. Cotton was also available in small quantities and it was very prized. Wealthy people would wear highly decorated textiles which would include gold, precious metals and stones, and seashells. Markets were very important. Trade contributed heavily to spreading goods across the empire. For instance, cotton was not readily grown in the capital, but it was brought to the market from the southern colonies. Classes. The society was segregated into castes. The highest one were the rulers. The ruler during the arrival of the Spanish was Moctezuma II. The types of ceremonial clothing the ruler would wear was extensive, intricate, and lavish. It would be challenging to describe them without going into depth on the religion and rituals of the time. Warriors. Warriors were given good wages, land, and rank. Warriors would wear ichcahuipili, a garment worn as a vest, sometimes with sleeves and covering the body to the knees. It was made from thick layers of unspun cotton encased in fabrics and sewn together in diagonal patterns. These garments were arrow and even bulletproof. Spanish soldiers in Mexico would discard their metal armor in exchange for the ichcahuipili. Manuscripts were discovered to indicate that the emperor bestowed a textile to a warrior with 2 color blocks separated diagonally as a reward for capturing 4 or 5 enemies. The warrior also received other gifts such as headpieces adorned with feathers and knives, earplugs, labrets, and capes. The textile is the equivalent to the U.S. military classification system by stars. Blue tie-dye appears to be the highest ranking version of the textile. Some warriors of high rank were given a tlahuitzli. As bright colors were intended to project terror onto the enemy, one of the common tlahuitzli was the coyote, which came in colors such as red, white, yellow, and blue. The suit was limb encasing for protection, consisting of feathers sewn or glued onto fabric. Some of the highest ranking warriors are the eagle warrior and the jaguar warrior. The jaguar was a powerful symbol in Mesoamerica because it was the fiercest creature they knew of. each province could only bestow one feather jaguar garment a year, as it was extremely difficult to acquire the feathers for the construction. The eagle is also a fierce predator and made in a similar way. The headpieces for the coyote, jaguar, and eagle were not made from the actual animal skulls, but they were made of wood and adorned with feathers, gold, and precious stones. Although Mayans wore real pelts, the Mexica were careful to avoid repeating features of their nomadic past. The jaguar pelt is mainly a source of inspiration, received by the rulers to adorn their homes and furniture. The nobility were the well-educated and wealthy group that owned land, ran the government, and had servants and slaves. Priests and priestesses were well respected, but they had a lot of pressure. They were responsible for reading the stars, interpreting the horoscopes and calendars for all people in the society. From marriages, births, accompanying soldiers to battle, and making sacrifices to the gods, they were extremely busy. They wore mostly the shikoli, which was a sleeveless jacket. The free poor. Consisting mainly of bird hunters and farmers, the free class were people similar to sustenance farmers and villagers today. Their clothing, understandably, was a lot simpler than that of the nobility. Men would wear a loincloth and a mantle, similar to a sarape today. The mantle was tied on the right shoulder. Wealthier men would wear mantles with ornamentation and colors. Women would wear a skirt called cueto, which was a long cloth tied by a sash. They would often wear a huipil on top, which is a long blouse. Otomi women would wear a quechquepmetil, which is similar to a poncho. Servants. Servants could be bought and sold like slaves. However, they were not considered to be property. They could have their own slaves and servants, as well as other businesses, much like maids and drivers today. Slaves. Slavery was not a class one was born into, but rather a situation one finds oneself in. They may become a slave as punishment or by enemy capture. Slaves were considered property. They were bought and sold and must obey their masters. Slaves could purchase their freedom or be freed by their masters. Understandably, their garments would be among the simplest of all Aztec people. They are the equivalent of prisoners in today's standards. The largest class of people, the middle class, consisted of all the professions not mentioned before. They include accountants, lawyers, potters, painters, and jewelry makers. Motifs. The motifs in Aztec textiles have been perverted by fast fashion, but it will be okay because there is a substantial community of people who are invested in preserving the true patterns and meaning behind these intricate textiles. The Mexica people perceived the world to consist of both the material and immaterial. Their spiritual and solar calendar were highly advanced compared to other cultures at the time. The religion was polytheistic, where the deities represented the sun, water, fortune, and rain, among others. The motifs can represent deities, animals, and other symbols from the religion which centers around the stars. Many of the symbols had multiple meanings. A butterfly would represent change, while a frog would indicate joy. One of the most important symbols is that of the sun. It is often represented like a flower. The center is usually concentric circles, with rays emerging from all sides. The sun can also be drawn with a spiral center indicating its motion through the day. It can be slightly occluded, such as at sunset. A very important symbol are the 4 points, which is significant in representing the 4 solstices and the 4 cardinal directions. The split spiral has a beautiful meaning, depicting the sun through the year. You can call it the shape of the year, Olin, or movement. This is depicted as 2 different spirals interlocking. 2 split spirals of 2 different colors can also represent day and night. The spiral with stairs often represents the sun, clouds, and rain. Jewelry. Jewelry is a major topic on its own, as the jewelry industry in Mexico is protected and thriving. One thing that is different about pre-Columbian Mexico compared to today is that, in the past, although all people wore jewelry, only the noble and respected people would wear the epic jewelry that involves body modification. All men and women wore earplugs. They would be made of leather or precious stone, and they could get rather massive. Labrettes. Labrettes were mainly reserved for warriors and the ruling class. They could be huge and ornate, such as these examples. Another one was the nose pendant, which was predominantly worn by the ruling class. Another piece of jewelry for the ruling class and warriors was the headdress. The king Moctezuma wore this brilliant green feathered headdress. The green feathers came from the quetzal bird, which only has a couple of feathers on its tail. Bracelets and necklaces were worn by all people. Often people wore cuffs of gold and silver, jade, turquoise, and other stones. Today, many Mexican people wear European-inspired clothing. It is currently considered to be old-fashioned to wear embroidered and traditional textiles. The textile industry is threatened by competition from mechanized markets in other countries and cheaper synthetic fibers. However, it is still possible to find traditional woven clothing by natives around the capital city. Many of the motifs, bright colors, and modern version of some of the traditional clothing still exist and are easy to acquire. Ponchos and sarapes are known worldwide. I hope to see some of the traditional fabrics experience a revival before some of the artisanal crafts are lost forever. Thanks for watching.